Emma Reynolds entered the boutique with a sense of excitement, eager to find the perfect dress for her father's charity gala. The elegant store, filled with racks of high-end designer clothing, had always fascinated her. This was her first time shopping here alone, a moment that should have felt empowering. However, instead of being just another customer, she quickly became the target of unwarranted scrutiny. Evelyn Drake, a longtime customer with an air of entitlement, immediately took notice of Emma the moment she stepped inside. To Evelyn, this teenager did not fit the image of someone who should be shopping in such an exclusive boutique. Without knowing anything about Emma, she assumed the worst, her judgment clouded by deep-seated biases. As Emma moved through the store, carefully admiring different dresses, Evelyn's gaze followed her with growing disdain. Emma remained unaware of the silent hostility directed toward her. She was focused on finding the right dress, one that would make her feel confident and elegant for the upcoming event. After browsing for a while, she found a beautiful gown, one that she knew would be perfect. But as she picked it up, Evelyn muttered under her breath, ensuring that other shoppers heard her words. "They really let anyone in these days," she said, her voice laced with irritation. Despite the quiet murmurs spreading among customers, Emma remained composed. She had faced casual prejudice before, but there was something sharper about this moment, something meant to diminish her. Still, she refused to shrink under Evelyn's scrutiny. She held her head high, determined not to let someone else's assumptions ruin her experience. Evelyn, however, was not finished. In her mind, Emma's very presence in the store was an offense. She was determined to make it clear that this boutique was not meant for people like her. With her condescending tone and judgmental stares, she set the stage for an unnecessary confrontation, one that would soon escalate into something far bigger than she had anticipated. Evelyn Drake carried herself with an air of superiority, a woman who believed that status and privilege determined a person's worth. The moment she laid eyes on Emma, her expression twisted with disapproval. To Evelyn, a young black girl browsing through the boutique's high-end dresses did not fit the image she expected in such an establishment. She saw Emma not as a fellow customer, but as an outsider, someone who did not belong in a space she deemed exclusive. Her disdain quickly turned into passive-aggressive whispers, muttered remarks meant to belittle and alienate. She watched Emma's every move, convinced that she had no business being there. Instead of minding her own shopping, Evelyn focused entirely on Emma, determined to prove that she was out of place. Her comments, laced with prejudice, echoed through the boutique, drawing uncomfortable glances from other customers. But it wasn't enough for Evelyn to merely cast judgment. She wanted action. Convinced of her own assumptions, she approached the manager with an air of authority, spinning a tale that portrayed Emma as suspicious, as someone who was there to cause trouble. With each word, Evelyn's prejudice became more evident. She wasn't simply questioning Emma's right to shop, she was trying to strip her of her dignity. Evelyn's disdain wasn't just about Emma. It was about a mindset deeply rooted in bias, the belief that certain people don't deserve access to the same spaces, the same opportunities, or the same respect. In her mind, wealth and privilege belonged to a select group, and Emma, in her eyes, wasn't part of it. But what Evelyn failed to realize was that her judgmental arrogance would soon be her downfall. Evelyn Drake was not content with silent judgment, she wanted Emma out of the boutique. Convinced that the teenager didn't belong, she took it upon herself to create a scene. With an air of superiority, she flagged down the store manager, her voice carrying across the room. "I've been watching that girl," she said sharply, her finger pointed in accusation. "She's acting suspiciously. I'm sure she's stolen something." Emma's heart pounded as all eyes turned toward her. She had done nothing wrong, yet suddenly, she was on trial in front of an audience of strangers. The store manager hesitated, glancing between Evelyn and Emma, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. The tension in the room thickened as customers murmured, watching closely. "I haven't taken anything," Emma said firmly, keeping her voice steady despite the embarrassment burning inside her. But Evelyn wasn't interested in the truth, she wanted confirmation of her own prejudice. "Then you won't mind showing us your bag," she sneered. Emma, refusing to be intimidated, held out her bag without hesitation. The manager checked, her hands shaking slightly. After a long moment, she looked up. "There's nothing here," she admitted quietly. Evelyn's face twisted in frustration. "Check again." She must have hidden it somewhere, she demanded, unwilling to accept that she had been wrong. Emma took a deep breath, her patience wearing thin. "This isn't about theft," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "This is about you making assumptions about me." The weight of her words settled over the boutique. The customers, once uncertain, began to see the truth. Evelyn's accusations weren't about evidence, but about bias. Yet, despite being humiliated in front of a crowd, Emma refused to shrink. She stood tall, proving that dignity was something no one could take from her. Emma Reynolds refused to crumble under the weight of Evelyn Drake's accusations. Though her heart pounded with frustration, she stood her ground, her posture straight and her expression composed. She had done nothing wrong, and she wasn't about to let Evelyn's prejudice make her doubt herself. "I think we're done here," Emma said, her voice steady but sharp. "Unless you have actual proof, I suggest you stop harassing me." Evelyn scoffed, folding her arms. "If you have nothing to hide, why are you being so defensive?" Emma met her gaze without flinching. "You accused me without reason, and I refuse to let you bully me into silence. That's not defensiveness, that's dignity." A murmur spread through the store as the watching customers began to shift uncomfortably. Some exchanged glances, realizing how unfairly Emma was being treated. A few nodded in quiet support. The manager, still unsure of how to handle the situation, hesitated before speaking. "I think it's best if you leave," she said softly, directing her words at Emma. Emma's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to leave," she repeated, her tone filled with disbelief. "Even though I've done nothing wrong." Evelyn smirked, sensing victory. "Exactly," she said smugly. "You're just proving my point." Emma inhaled deeply, resisting the urge to lash out in anger. Instead, she turned her attention to the people around her. She let her gaze sweep over the customers, over the store employees, over the manager who was allowing this injustice to happen. "You're all watching this," she said, her voice firm. "You see what's happening here. You see that I've been treated unfairly, yet you're staying silent. Is that the kind of place this is? Is this the kind of behavior you want to support?" The tension in the room thickened. Some customers looked away in shame. A few shook their heads at Evelyn. The manager's face paled, realizing how bad this looked. Evelyn, however, wasn't backing down. "This store has standards," she said, her voice rising. "People like you." Emma cut her off. "People like me," she repeated, her tone laced with quiet strength. "Say what you really mean." Evelyn faltered. The weight of her own words was beginning to dawn on her. But before she could respond, Emma pulled out her phone. She dialed quickly and raised it to her ear. "Dad," she said, her voice unwavering despite the chaos around her. "I need you to come to the boutique. There's a situation here." Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Calling your boyfriend to bail you out," she sneered. Emma ignored her. She simply slipped her phone back into her pocket, lifted her chin, and waited. She knew the truth was about to come crashing down on Evelyn in a way she'd never forget. The air in the boutique was thick with tension as Emma's call ended. She stood tall, her confidence unwavering despite Evelyn Drake's blatant attempts to humiliate her. The other customers, who had initially watched in silent curiosity, were now visibly uncomfortable. They had seen the entire scene unfold, and it was becoming increasingly clear who was truly in the wrong. Evelyn, however, refused to back down. She smirked, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "You really think calling someone is going to change the fact that you don't belong here?" she sneered. Emma's expression remained calm. "I don't have to prove anything to you," she replied. "But you've already proven plenty about yourself." The store manager, still uncertain, nervously glanced at Evelyn. She had allowed things to go too far, and now she could feel the shift in the room. Customers were murmuring amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from disapproval to outright disgust. One older woman near the counter shook her head. "This is wrong," she whispered to a man beside her. "That girl did nothing wrong." Evelyn's face tightened as she overheard the comment, but before she could respond, the glass doors of the boutique swung open. A tall, commanding man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped inside. His presence alone was enough to make the store fall into a hushed silence. Nathan Reynolds had arrived. His sharp eyes scanned the boutique, taking in the scattered customers, the flustered manager, and most importantly, his daughter standing tall amidst it all. Evelyn's confidence wavered for the first time as she watched Nathan stride forward. "Oh, another parent," she muttered under her breath. "That's just great." Nathan ignored her. He walked straight to Emma, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "What's going on here?" he asked, his voice steady but authoritative. Before Emma could speak, Evelyn took a step forward. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, forcing a polite smile. "There's been a situation. This girl," she gestured at Emma, "has been acting suspiciously. I was only trying to protect the store's reputation." Nathan's gaze shifted to the store manager. "Is this true?" he asked. The manager hesitated, shifting uncomfortably. "Well, Mrs. Drake had concerns, but we checked Emma's bag and found nothing." Evelyn scoffed. "That doesn't mean she wasn't planning to take something. People like her." Nathan's head snapped toward her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a sharpness that made Evelyn pause. "People like her," he repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Evelyn swallowed hard. I just meant, certain types of customers." Nathan's expression darkened. "You mean my daughter?" Gasps rippled through the boutique. Evelyn's face turned ashen, and for the first time, true panic flickered in her eyes. The weight of her mistake hit her like a freight train. She had spent the past several minutes demeaning and falsely accusing the daughter of the very man who owned the boutique she so proudly frequented. Silence stretched between them. Evelyn, once smug and overconfident, was now visibly trembling. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathan took a slow step forward. "You judged her without reason. You harassed her in front of a room full of people. And now, you're realizing just how badly you've miscalculated." The store remained completely still, waiting for what would come next. The boutique's atmosphere shifted the moment the glass doors swung open. The once smug expression on Evelyn Drake's face wavered as a tall, imposing man stepped inside. His tailored suit, polished shoes, and quiet confidence exuded authority. Customers instinctively fell silent, sensing a shift in power. The store manager paled, already recognizing the man who had just entered. Nathan Reynolds had arrived. His sharp gaze swept across the boutique, assessing the scene. He took in the scattered customers, the flustered store manager, and, most importantly, his daughter standing in the middle of it all. Emma's posture was strong, her chin lifted slightly in defiance. But Nathan could see the tension in her shoulders, the subtle way her hands clenched at her sides. Evelyn, still oblivious to the gravity of the situation, scoffed under her breath. Finally, a responsible adult, she muttered, folding her arms. "Let's hope he has some sense." Nathan strode forward with calm precision. He placed a steady hand on Emma's shoulder, his presence grounding her. Then, in a voice that was both measured and commanding, he asked, "What's going on here?" Before Emma could respond, Evelyn took the opportunity to speak. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm so glad you're here," she said, pasting on a forced smile. "There's been an incident. This girl," she gestured at Emma without a hint of respect, "has been acting suspiciously. I was only trying to protect the store's reputation." Nathan's expression didn't change, but the slight tilt of his head made the air in the room grow heavier. "Is that so?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. The store manager, who had been standing awkwardly to the side, swallowed nervously. "Mrs. Drake had concerns," she admitted. "She insisted we check Miss Reynolds' bag, but we found nothing." Nathan's gaze flickered to the manager for a brief second before returning to Evelyn. "You accused my daughter of stealing," he stated, his tone sharp yet controlled. Evelyn blinked. I didn't know she was your daughter," she stammered, her confidence beginning to wane. Nathan's jaw tightened. "And if she wasn't? Would that have made your actions acceptable?" A murmur spread through the boutique as customers exchanged glances, their earlier discomfort solidifying into clear disapproval. Evelyn's face turned red, her hands gripping the strap of her purse. "I was just trying to be cautious," she muttered. "People like her." Nathan's eyes darkened instantly. "People like her," he repeated. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a blade. Evelyn took a nervous step back. I didn't mean." Nathan straightened, his presence radiating authority. "You judged her without cause. You humiliated her in front of a store full of people. And now, you're realizing just how badly you've miscalculated." Evelyn's throat bobbed as she struggled to form a response, but for the first time, she had no words. The boutique remained silent, waiting for Nathan's next move. Evelyn Drake had spent years believing she was untouchable. Her wealth, her status, and her sharp tongue had always ensured she got her way. But now, standing in the boutique with Nathan Reynolds' cold, unflinching gaze locked onto hers, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: fear. The murmurs around the store grew louder, the weight of judgment pressing down on her. The same customers who had once watched in silence now whispered among themselves, their expressions filled with disapproval. Evelyn had expected support, had assumed that the manager and the onlookers would rally behind her. But instead, she found herself standing alone. I didn't know she was your daughter," Evelyn stammered, her voice shaky. "If I had known." Nathan raised a hand, silencing her mid-sentence. "And what difference would that have made?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with quiet fury. "Would you have treated her with respect if she were someone else's daughter? Or would you have humiliated her just the same?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no sound came out. She had no defense. No excuse. The realization of her actions hit her like a wave. The store manager, looking pale and deeply uncomfortable, shifted awkwardly beside her. "Mr. Reynolds, I didn't know what to do," she admitted. Mrs. Drake was insistent. Nathan's expression hardened. "You allowed an innocent girl to be accused without proof," he said. "You stood by as she was humiliated, despite having no reason to suspect her of anything. Tell me, is that how you run your store?" The manager lowered her gaze, her hands wringing together. "No, sir," she whispered. Evelyn's confidence had already begun to crack, but Nathan's next words shattered it completely. "You claim you were protecting the store's reputation," he said, taking a step closer, his voice like ice. "But let me be clear, this store carries my name. My brand. And the only reputation at risk here is yours." A gasp rippled through the boutique. Evelyn's face drained of color. Your name?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I own this store, Mrs. Drake," he said. "And as of this moment, you are no longer welcome here." Evelyn staggered back as if she had been physically struck. The arrogance she had carried so proudly vanished, replaced by sheer humiliation. She glanced around, searching for an ally, but all she found were stares of disappointment and disgust. The realization dawned on her, there was no escaping this. For the first time in her life, Evelyn Drake had no power. No influence. No control. And as she turned toward the exit, her head low and her steps unsteady, she knew one thing for certain, she would never forget this day. Nathan Reynolds stood tall, his commanding presence silencing the murmurs that filled the boutique. His sharp gaze flicked between the store manager and Evelyn Drake, his voice steady but laced with disappointment. "Let's be clear," he said, each word deliberate. "This isn't just about my daughter. This is about the way you treat people, about the assumptions you make before you even know who they are." Evelyn swallowed hard, her usual confidence shattered. She had never been on the receiving end of such scrutiny, and now, the power she once wielded was slipping through her fingers. "I was just trying to protect the store," she muttered weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Protect it from what?" he demanded. "From a young woman shopping for a dress? From someone who had every right to be here?" His voice hardened. "Or were you protecting it from your own prejudices?" The store manager shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing her own failure in the situation. "Mr. Reynolds, she began, but Nathan cut her off with a raised hand. "You had a choice," he said firmly. "You could have questioned these accusations. You could have stood up for a customer who had done nothing wrong. Instead, you allowed her to be humiliated." He let his words hang in the air, their weight undeniable. Evelyn, now visibly shaken, opened her mouth to speak but quickly shut it. There was nothing she could say to undo what had just happened. Nathan exhaled, his expression softening only when he turned to Emma. "You handled this with grace," he told her. "But no one should have to prove they belong." With that, he turned back to the store manager. "Make no mistake, this will not happen again." Evelyn Drake's face burned with embarrassment as Nathan Reynolds's words echoed through the boutique. The weight of her actions had finally caught up with her, and the realization was sinking in fast. The same arrogance that had fueled her accusations now left her defenseless. She opened her mouth to protest, to justify herself, but no words came out. The judging stares of the customers, the whispered murmurs, everything made it painfully clear. She had lost. Nathan turned to the store manager, his tone sharp. "This establishment is meant to represent class and dignity. If you allow this kind of behavior, then you don't deserve my business." His words sent a clear message, not just to the staff but to everyone in the room. Evelyn, grasping for control, scoffed. "I was just..." Nathan raised a hand, cutting her off. "You were just making assumptions, disrespecting my daughter, and embarrassing yourself." His voice was calm, but the finality in it was undeniable. He turned to the store's security guard. "Make sure she leaves." Evelyn's confidence crumbled completely. "Wait, what?" she stammered, her eyes widening. The security guard stepped forward, motioning toward the door. "Ma'am, you need to leave." A hushed silence filled the boutique as Evelyn hesitated, her pride keeping her frozen in place. But there was no escaping this. With a final huff, she spun on her heel and stormed out, her expensive heels clicking against the floor. As the door shut behind her, the boutique exhaled, as if a weight had been lifted. The lesson had been delivered, and Evelyn Drake had no choice but to face the consequences of her own prejudice. As the boutique settled after Evelyn's dramatic exit, a quiet understanding passed through the room. The lesson was clear: respect and dignity should never be determined by wealth, status, or appearance. Nathan Reynolds, standing tall beside his daughter, let his gaze sweep over the staff and customers, ensuring that his message had sunk in. Turning to the store manager, he spoke with calm authority. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about how you treat every customer who walks through these doors. Your silence allowed this to happen, and that is unacceptable." The manager, still shaken, nodded in shame. Emma, though still humiliated by the ordeal, stood with unwavering composure. "I didn't need special treatment," she said, her voice steady. "I just wanted to be treated fairly." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Some customers looked down, ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. Others exchanged approving glances, recognizing the importance of what had just transpired. Nathan sighed, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Dignity isn't something given, it's something you hold on to, no matter what." His words resonated beyond the boutique's walls, serving as a powerful reminder that true respect is earned through character, not privilege. As father and daughter left, a shift in the air remained. This wasn't just an incident, it was a moment of change, a lesson that would not be forgotten. As Emma walked out of the boutique with her father, she held her head high. Though she had been unfairly humiliated, she refused to let the incident define her. She had faced Evelyn's prejudice with strength, standing firm in the face of baseless accusations. Now, she was leaving not as a victim, but as someone who had demanded respect and refused to back down. Nathan glanced at his daughter, admiration clear in his eyes. "I'm proud of you," he said, his voice steady. "You didn't let her break you." Emma nodded, exhaling slowly. "People like her expect silence," she said. "But I won't be silent." She knew that Evelyn wasn't the only person in the world who held such biases, and this wouldn't be the last time she faced discrimination. But today, she had proven something, to herself and to everyone who had witnessed the confrontation. She had shown that standing up for oneself, even when it's difficult, is always the right choice. The boutique staff and customers had seen firsthand what happens when prejudice goes unchecked, and Emma hoped that some of them would think twice before making the same mistake Evelyn had. As she stepped into the car, she made a silent promise to herself: no matter where life took her, she would always fight for what was right. Today was just the beginning. One of the most important lessons from this story is the power of integrity and standing firm in the face of prejudice. In life, we may encounter situations where we are judged unfairly, not by our actions, but by others' assumptions. Emma's story teaches us that dignity is not something others can take away unless we allow them to. When faced with injustice, staying composed, speaking with confidence, and refusing to be intimidated can turn the tide. This lesson applies not just to moments of public discrimination, but also to everyday life. Whether in the workplace, in social settings, or even among family, biases, both conscious and unconscious, can shape how people are treated. As we grow older, we have a responsibility to challenge these biases, not only for ourselves but for future generations. Additionally, Nathan Reynolds' response highlights the importance of using one's influence for good. Power is not just about status, it is about taking action when it matters. Respect and dignity should not depend on wealth or background, they should be afforded to everyone. Ultimately, this story reminds us that true character is revealed in moments of adversity. How we respond to injustice defines who we are.